The morning sun was shining bright through the big windows of Chicago O'Hare Airport. Marcus and Michael Thompson walked side by side through the busy airport. The 17-year-old twins looked exactly the same. They had the same bright smile, the same way of walking, and the same excitement in their dark eyes. Both boys wore their best clothes for this special trip. Marcus had on a clean white shirt and dark blue pants. Michael wore a light blue shirt with black pants. Their mother had made sure they looked perfect before leaving home. She had even given them each a small comb to fix their hair if needed. "I can't believe we're finally doing this," Marcus said to his brother as they walked past the coffee shops and gift stores. His voice was full of joy and a little bit of nervousness, too. Michael nodded and smiled. "Mom looked so worried when she dropped us off. She must have told us to be careful at least 10 times. He laughed softly, remembering how their mother had hugged them both extra tight at the drop-off area. The twins had been planning this trip for 6 long months. They were going to Atlanta to see their cousin Sarah graduate from college. Sarah was like a big sister to them. She had always helped them with homework and gave them advice about everything. This graduation was a big deal for the whole family. Their parents had been hesitant at first. Marcus and Michael had never traveled alone before. But the boys had. Worked part-time jobs all summer to save money for the tickets. They washed cars, cut grass, and helped neighbors with yard work. Every dollar they earned went into their special savings jar. "Remember what Dad told us about flying?" Marcus asked, as they found the signs pointing to their gate. "Be polite, keep our tickets safe, and don't talk to strangers." Michael repeated the words their father had said many times. Their dad had given them a long talk about airport safety and how to behave on the plane. The airport was busier than they had expected. People were everywhere, pulling suitcases, carrying bags, and rushing to catch their flights. The twins had arrived 2 hours early, just like their parents had told them to do. They wanted to make sure nothing went wrong on their first solo trip. They found their gate number on the big screens. Gate B12. The walk took them through long hallways and past many other gates. Other passengers sat in chairs, reading books, looking at their phones, or sleeping. Some families had small children who were running around and playing. "Look, there's our gate." Michael pointed ahead. They could see the sign for Gate B12 and a small crowd of people waiting nearby. The boys found 2 empty seats near the big windows where they could see the planes. Marcus pulled out his phone to text their parents that they had arrived at the gate safely. Michael opened his backpack to double-check that their tickets were still there. "Flight 447 to Atlanta," Michael read from his ticket. "Seat 23A and 23B. They had paid extra to sit together. The thought of being separated on their first flight had worried them both. As they sat and waited, they watched other passengers arrive at their gate. There were business people in suits talking on phones. There were families with excited children going on vacation. There was an elderly couple holding hands and looking at a travel book. Marcus pulled out a small wrapped box from his backpack. "Do you think Sarah will like this?" he asked his brother. Inside the box was a beautiful silver necklace they had bought for their cousin. They had saved extra money just for this gift. "She's going to love it," Michael said with confidence. "Remember how she always wears jewelry? This will be perfect for her graduation pictures." The twins talked quietly about their weekend plans. They would stay with their aunt and uncle in Atlanta. On Saturday, they would go to Sarah's graduation ceremony. On Sunday, the whole family was having a big party with lots of food and music. The boys were especially excited about their aunt's famous fried chicken and homemade pie. Time passed slowly as they waited. The twins played simple games on their phones and shared a bag of chips they had bought. They talked about school, their friends back home, and their plans for the summer. Everything felt perfect and normal. About 30 minutes before their flight was supposed to board, Marcus noticed something strange. A woman in a Skyline Airlines uniform kept looking at them. She was standing behind the check-in counter at their gate, but instead of helping passengers, she seemed to be watching the twins. "Is that lady looking at us?" Marcus whispered to his brother. Michael turned to look, trying not to be obvious. The woman quickly looked away when she saw him looking back. "Maybe she's just doing her job," Michael said, but he felt a little uncomfortable too. The woman's name tag said Patricia Wells. She was middle-aged with short brown hair and glasses. She kept picking up papers and putting them down, but her eyes kept moving back to where the twins were sitting. "Attention passengers," came an announcement over the speaker. "Flight 447 to Atlanta will begin boarding in approximately 15 minutes. Please have your boarding passes and identification ready." The twins felt their excitement grow even stronger. They were so close to starting their adventure. Marcus put his phone in his pocket and Michael zipped up his backpack. They stood up and walked toward the boarding area where other passengers were already starting to form lines. "Group A passengers may now board," the announcement continued. The twins looked at their tickets. They were in Group C, so they would have to wait a little longer. As they stood in the growing crowd of passengers, Marcus felt someone bump into him. "Excuse me," said a friendly voice. It was an older man with a kind smile. "First time flying?" "Yes, sir," Marcus answered politely. "We're going to see our cousin graduate from college." "That's wonderful," the man said. "You boys seem very responsible. Your parents must be proud." Michael smiled. "Thank you. We worked all summer to pay for this trip ourselves." The man nodded with approval and wished them a good flight before walking away. The simple conversation made the twins feel more confident and grown up. "Group B passengers may now board," came another announcement. The twins moved closer to the front of the line. They could see the entrance to the plane now. Flight attendants were smiling and greeting passengers as they boarded. Everything looked normal and welcoming. Group C passengers may now board. This was it. Marcus and Michael Thompson stepped forward with their tickets and identification in hand, ready to start their journey to Atlanta. They had no idea that in just a few minutes their perfect day would turn into something they would never forget. Twins walked up to the gate counter with big smiles, completely unaware that Patricia Wells was about to change their lives forever. Marcus and Michael Thompson walked up to the gate counter with their tickets and ID cards ready. They were smiling and excited, just like any other passengers ready to board their flight. But Patricia Wells, the gate agent, looked at them with a cold stare that made both boys feel uncomfortable right away. "Tickets and ID," Patricia said in a sharp voice. Her tone was different from how she had spoken to other passengers. The twins noticed this but handed over their documents anyway, thinking maybe she was just having a bad day. Patricia took their tickets and looked at them for a very long time. She held the papers close to her face, then far away, then close again. She did the same thing with their ID cards, comparing their faces to their photos over and over again. Other passengers behind them started to get impatient. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Marcus asked politely. He had been taught to always be respectful to adults, especially when traveling. Patricia didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up her phone and made a call. "James, can you come to gate B12? I need you to look at something," she said quietly, but the twins could hear every word. Michael felt his stomach start to twist with worry. "Did we do something wrong?" he whispered to his brother. "I don't think so," Marcus whispered back. "We have our tickets and ID just like everyone else." The line behind them was getting longer. People were checking their watches and looking annoyed. Some passengers started to complain about the delay. The twins could feel everyone staring at them, and it made them feel very embarrassed. James Mitchell, the supervisor, arrived at the counter. He was a tall man with gray hair and a serious face. He looked at the twins like they were troublemakers even though they had done nothing wrong. "What's the issue here?" James asked Patricia, but his eyes never left the twins. "These two," Patricia said, pointing at Marcus and Michael like they were objects instead of people. "Something doesn't feel right about their tickets. I think we need to do some extra checking." James took their tickets and ID cards. He examined them just as carefully as Patricia had done. Then he walked over to a computer and started typing. The twins stood there feeling confused and scared. They had bought their tickets online weeks ago, just like their father had taught them to do. "Sir, we bought these tickets with our own money," Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We can show you the receipt on my phone if you want." "That won't be necessary right now," James said without looking at him. "We just need to make sure everything is in order." But everything was clearly not in order from the twins' point of view. They watched as other passengers, including some who had arrived after them, walked past and boarded the plane without any problems. A white family with 3 children went through in less than 30 seconds. An elderly white couple was greeted with smiles and helpful assistance. "There seems to be an issue with your tickets," Patricia announced loudly. Her voice was loud enough for many passengers to hear. "We're going to need to do some additional security screening." "Additional security screening?" Marcus asked, confused. "But we already went through security when we entered the airport. They checked everything." "That's not enough," James said firmly. "You two fit a certain profile that requires extra attention. It's for the safety of all passengers." The twins looked at each other with growing fear and confusion. What profile? What had they done wrong? They were honor students who had never been in trouble in their lives. They volunteered at their local community center and helped elderly neighbors with their groceries. A security officer was called to the gate. His name was Officer Rodriguez, and he looked uncomfortable with the situation from the moment he arrived. But he had been told to do his job, so he started asking the twins questions. "Where are you traveling to?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "Atlanta, sir," Michael answered. "We're going to our cousin's college graduation." "Who's paying for your trip?" "We are," Marcus said proudly. "We worked all summer to save money for these tickets." "What kind of work?" The questions continued for several minutes. The twins answered every question honestly and politely. They explained about their part-time jobs, their cousin Sarah, their family, and their weekend plans. They showed photos on their phones of Sarah and their family members in Atlanta. But nothing they said seemed to satisfy Patricia Wells or James Mitchell. Instead of becoming more reasonable, they became more suspicious. They asked the security officer to search the twins' backpacks again, even though they had already been searched at the main security checkpoint. This time, the search happened, right there at the gate in front of all the other passengers. Personal items were pulled out and examined. The wrapped gift for their cousin Sarah was unwrapped and inspected. Their clean clothes were unfolded and shaken out. Their phone chargers, school books, and even their snacks were looked at carefully. The twins felt completely humiliated. People were staring, pointing and whispering. Some passengers looked angry about the delay. Others looked confused about why 2 polite young men were being treated like criminals. A few people seemed to understand what was really happening and looked sad and angry on the twins' behalf. "This is embarrassing," Michael whispered to his brother, trying not to cry. "I know," Marcus whispered back. "But we haven't done anything wrong. This has to end soon." But it didn't end soon. After the bag search, Patricia Wells made another announcement that made the twins' hearts sink. "After careful review," she said in a loud voice, "these passengers will not be allowed to board this flight. Their tickets have been flagged for security reasons." "What security reasons?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking with emotion. "We answered all your questions. We showed you everything you asked to see. What more do you want?" "The decision has been made," James Mitchell said coldly. "You can try to book another flight tomorrow if you can provide additional documentation." The twins stood there in shock. Around them, the boarding process continued. The last few passengers walked onto the plane, looking at the boys with curiosity and pity. The gate agent began preparing to close the door to the aircraft. Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes, but he tried to be strong. Michael's hands were shaking as he put their searched belongings back into his backpack. Their carefully wrapped gift for Sarah was now crumpled and torn. "This isn't fair," Michael said quietly, but loud enough for several passengers to hear. "Life isn't always fair, young man," Patricia Wells replied, with no emotion in her voice. "Maybe next time you'll be better prepared." Better prepared for what? The twins had done everything right. They had followed every rule, answered every question, and shown every document requested. But somehow it still wasn't enough. As the plane door closed and the aircraft began to pull away from the gate, Marcus and Michael Thompson stood there feeling completely helpless and alone. They were about to miss their cousin's graduation, and they didn't understand why. But most painful of all, They were beginning to realize that the color of their skin might be the real reason they were being treated this way. And that thought made them feel sick and scared and angry all at the same time. Marcus and Michael Thompson sat in the empty chairs near Gate B12, watching their plane taxi away from the gate. The airplane that was supposed to take them to their cousin's graduation was leaving without them. Other passengers had gone home or moved to different gates, but the twins just sat there feeling lost and confused. "I can't believe this happened," Michael said quietly, staring at his hands. His voice was shaking and his eyes were red from trying not to cry. Marcus felt like his whole world had turned upside down. Just 2 hours ago they had been so excited about their trip. Now they felt embarrassed, hurt, and completely helpless. The worst part was that they still didn't understand what they had done wrong. "We need to call Dad," Marcus said, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. He dreaded making this call. Their father had always taught them to be strong and independent. How could he explain that they had failed on their very first solo trip? "What are we going to tell him?" Michael asked, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "The truth," Marcus replied, but his voice didn't sound confident. "We tell him exactly what happened." Marcus looked at his phone screen for a long moment before dialing. He knew his father would be at work, probably in an important meeting. David Thompson was always busy with his job as a CEO. The twins had been so proud to show him that they could handle this trip by themselves. The phone rang 3 times before their father answered. "Marcus, is everything okay? You should be on the plane by now." David Thompson's voice was warm and concerned. He was sitting in his big office on the 47th floor of the Skyline Airlines headquarters building, looking out at the city below. "Dad, we have a problem," Marcus began, his voice breaking slightly. "They wouldn't let us on the plane." David immediately sat up straighter in his chair. "What do you mean they wouldn't let you on the plane? Did you forget your ID? Are your tickets okay?" "No, Dad, we had everything. We did everything right, just like you taught us," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But the gate agent, she said there was something wrong with our tickets. Then they searched our bags in front of everybody and said we couldn't fly." David felt his heart start to beat faster. "Wait, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened from the beginning." For the next few minutes, Marcus told his father everything. He described how Patricia Wells had looked at them strangely, how she had taken so long to check their tickets, how the supervisor had been called over, and how they had been treated like criminals in front of all the other passengers. As David listened, his shock slowly turned into something much stronger. He was the CEO of Skyline Airlines, the very company that was treating his sons this way. The irony was bitter and painful. He had built this company from a small regional airline into one of the biggest carriers in the country, always telling his employees to treat every customer with respect and dignity. "Dad, are you still there?" Marcus asked when his father didn't respond right away. "Yes, I'm here," David said, his voice now cold and controlled. "Tell me the names of the people who did this to you." "The gate agent was Patricia Wells and the supervisor was James Mitchell," Marcus replied, reading from a business card he had picked up from the counter. David wrote down the names with sharp, angry strokes. These were his employees, people who worked for him and were supposed to represent his company's values. Instead, they had humiliated his children and violated everything he believed in. "What did they say was wrong with your tickets?" David asked, trying to understand the situation completely. "They never really said," Michael answered, taking the phone from his brother. "They just kept saying we fit some kind of profile and that it was for security reasons. But Dad, we answered all their questions. We showed them everything they asked for. We were polite the whole time." David's anger was growing stronger with every word. He knew his sons were good kids. They were honor students who had never been in trouble. They had worked hard all summer to pay for this trip themselves. The idea that they were being treated like criminals because of their skin color made him furious. "Dad, I think they treated us this way because we're black," Marcus said quietly, finally saying what both twins had been thinking. Those words hit David like a punch to the stomach. He had always known that racism still existed in the world, but he had hoped that his sons would never have to experience it personally. He had worked so hard to give them a good life, to protect them from the ugliness that he had faced when he was younger. "Listen to me very carefully," David said, his voice now filled with determination. "You two did nothing wrong, nothing at all. What happened to you was completely unfair and unacceptable, and I'm going to make sure that it never happens to anyone else." The twins could hear the change in their father's voice. He sounded different now, not just like their dad, but like the powerful businessman he was during the day. "What are you going to do?" Michael asked. "I'm going to fix this," David said firmly. "Right now, stay exactly where you are. Don't move from that gate. Someone will come to help you very soon." "But Dad, what about Sarah's graduation?" "We're going to miss it," Marcus said sadly. "No, you're not," David replied with complete confidence. "You're going to make it to that graduation, and you're going to be treated with the respect you deserve. I promise you that." After hanging up the phone, David Thompson sat in his office for a moment, staring out at the city. He was the CEO of Skyline Airlines, one of the most powerful men in the aviation industry. He had built his company on principles of fairness and equality, and now his own employees had violated those principles in the worst possible way. But David wasn't just angry as a CEO. He was angry as a father. His boys had been hurt and humiliated, and that was something he would never forgive or forget. He had the power to change things, and he was going to use every bit of that power to make sure justice was served. David picked up his phone again and started making calls. First, he called his head of security, then his VP of operations, then the airport manager in Chicago. Each call was short and to the point, but the message was clear. There was going to be consequences for what had happened to his sons. As he made his calls, David was already planning something that would shock the entire aviation industry. He was about to make a decision that would cost his company millions of dollars, but he didn't care about the money. He cared about his sons, and he cared about making sure that no other family would ever have to go through what his family was experiencing. The phone call that had started with two scared teenagers was about to change everything. David Thompson hung up the phone and immediately stood up from his desk. His hands were shaking with anger, but his mind was crystal clear. He had built Skyline Airlines from nothing into one of America's biggest airline companies, now his own. Employees had treated his sons like criminals, and he was going to make sure the whole world knew that this behavior was unacceptable. His first call was to Tom Rodriguez, his head of security. Tom had worked with David for over 10 years and had never heard his boss sound so angry. "Tom, I need you to do something right now," David said, his voice cold and controlled. "I want all security footage from Gate B12 in Chicago from this morning. Everything. I want to see exactly how my sons were treated." "Your sons?" Tom asked, confused. "What happened?" "They were denied boarding because of discrimination. My own company discriminated against my children," David said. "Get me that footage in the next 30 minutes, and I want the employees involved removed from their positions immediately." Tom had never heard David mention his personal life at work, but the pain in his boss's voice was clear. "I'll get right on it, sir. What are the names of the employees?" "Patricia Wells and James Mitchell, Gate B12, Chicago O'Hare. And Tom, when I say removed, I mean permanently. They will never work for this company again." David's second call was to Sarah Chen, his VP of operations. Sarah controlled the day-to-day operations of every Skyline Airlines flight across the country. "Sarah, I need you to prepare for an emergency order," David said without any greeting. "What kind of emergency?" Sarah asked, immediately alert. "I'm about to ground every single Skyline Airlines flight in the country," David announced. There was complete silence on the other end of the phone. Sarah thought she had heard wrong. "I'm sorry, did you say ground all flights?" "You heard me correctly. Every single flight. I want every plane on the ground within the next 2 hours. Sir, that will cost us millions of dollars. Passengers will be stranded everywhere. The media will go crazy. Are you sure about this?" David's voice was steady and sure. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. My sons were just discriminated against by our own employees at Gate B12 in Chicago. If our company culture allows this to happen, then we need to shut down until we fix it." Sarah knew David well enough to recognize when he had made a final decision. I'll start the process immediately. How long do you want the flights grounded? Until every single employee in this company goes through anti-discrimination training. Until we have new policies in place. Until I'm satisfied that this will never happen again. David's third call was to Michael Park, the Chicago Airport Operations Manager. Michael managed the relationship between Skyline Airlines and O'Hare Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. Michael, this is David Thompson. We have a serious situation at Gate B12. Mr. Thompson, what can I do for you? Michael asked nervously. It was rare for the CEO to call him directly. 2 of your gate agents just discriminated against passengers, my sons. I want Patricia Wells and James Mitchell removed from their positions right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Michael's heart started beating faster. Sir, I'll need to investigate the situation first. There are procedures we have to follow. The only procedure you need to follow is getting those employees away from passengers immediately, David said firmly. And I want my sons given VIP treatment for the rest of their journey. They will be flying to Atlanta on one of our private jets within the hour. Of course, sir, I'll take care of everything personally. But David wasn't finished. His next move would shock everyone who worked for him. He called an emergency meeting of his executive team, all the vice presidents and senior managers who ran different parts of the company. Within 30 minutes, 12 of the most important people at Skyline Airlines were sitting around the big conference table in David's office. They had all dropped everything to attend this meeting because David had never called an emergency meeting before. Ladies and gentlemen, David began, standing at the head of the table. Today our company failed in the worst possible way. 2 of our employees discriminated against passengers based on their race. Those passengers were my sons. The room was completely silent. Everyone knew that David kept his personal life very private. Most of them didn't even know he had children. I am grounding every Skyline Airlines flight effective immediately, David continued. Every plane, every route, everything stops until we fix this problem. Jennifer Walsh, the VP of Finance, spoke up first. David, this will cost us at least $50 million. Our stock price will crash. Passengers will sue us. This could destroy the company. Good, David replied. If this company can't treat all passengers with respect and dignity, then maybe it deserves to be destroyed. Robert Kim, the VP of Marketing, looked worried. What are we going to tell the media? How do we explain this? David walked over to his computer and started typing. I'm going to record a video message that will be played on every screen in every airport we serve. I'm going to tell the truth about what happened and why we're grounding our flights. Within an hour, David had recorded a powerful video message. In the video, he spoke directly to the camera, explaining what had happened to his sons and why the company was taking such drastic action. My name is David Thompson, and I am the CEO of Skyline Airlines, he began. Today, 2 of my employees discriminated against my 17-year-old sons at Chicago O'Hare Airport. They were denied boarding not because they had done anything wrong, but because of the color of their skin. David's voice was steady but filled with emotion. As a father, I am heartbroken. As a CEO, I am ashamed. As a human being, I am angry. This behavior does not represent the values of Skyline Airlines, and it will not be tolerated. The video continued for several minutes, with David explaining the company's response and promising that this would never happen again. The video was immediately sent to every airport where Skyline Airlines operated and shared on all social media platforms. Meanwhile, back at Chicago O'Hare, Marcus and Michael were watching the chaos unfold around them. Announcements were being made about flight cancellations. Passengers were confused and angry. Airport employees were running around trying to help stranded travelers, but the twins were no longer sitting alone and forgotten. A VIP services manager had come to find them personally. She apologized many times for what had happened and escorted them to a private lounge where they were given food, drinks, and comfortable chairs. Your father has arranged for a private jet to take you to Atlanta, she explained. It will be ready in 1 hour. Again, I am so sorry for how you were treated today. Patricia Wells and James Mitchell had been escorted out of the airport by security. Their careers in the airline industry were over. The video of their discriminatory behavior would follow them wherever they tried to work next. As David finished making his calls and sending his messages, he looked out at the city from his office window. He had just made one of the biggest business decisions of his life. It would cost millions of dollars and create chaos across the country. But as he thought about his son sitting in that airport, hurt and confused, he knew he had made the right choice. Some things were more important than money or business. Dignity, respect, and justice were worth any price. 2 hours after David Thompson made his shocking announcement, every Skyline Airlines plane in America was on the ground. Airports across the country were in chaos. Passengers were confused and angry. News reporters were rushing to airports to cover the biggest airline story of the year. But in a private jet high above the clouds, Marcus and Michael Thompson were finally on their way to Atlanta. The private jet was nothing like the commercial flight they had originally booked. There were only 8 large, comfortable seats, each one bigger than a chair in their living room at home. The flight attendant, Maria Santos, had personally apologized to them 3 times and made sure they had everything they needed. "I have 2 sons your age," Maria told them as she served them fresh sandwiches and cold drinks. "What happened to you today was completely wrong. Your father is a brave man for taking such strong action." Marcus looked out the window at the clouds below. "I still can't believe all of this happened because we tried to take a simple flight to see our cousin graduate." Michael was reading news articles about their story on his phone. "Look at this, Marcus. Our story is on every major news website. People all over the country are talking about what happened to us." The news coverage was incredible. Television reporters were standing outside airports explaining how the CEO of Skyline Airlines had grounded every flight because his own sons had been discriminated against. Social media was exploding with support for the twins and praise for their father's bold response. Many people shared their own stories of discrimination while traveling. Parents posted photos of their children with messages of support. Civil rights leaders praised David Thompson for taking real action instead of just making empty promises. But not everyone was happy about the situation. Thousands of passengers were stranded in airports, missing important meetings, family events, and vacations. Some people criticized David for disrupting so many lives because of one incident. Business experts worried about the financial cost to the company. Meanwhile, back at Skyline Airlines headquarters, David was working harder than he had ever worked in his life. He was creating new company policies, planning employee training programs, and personally calling other airline CEOs to explain his actions. His first priority was making sure Patricia Wells and James Mitchell could never treat anyone the way they had treated his sons. David made sure their termination was reported to industry databases. This meant they would have a very hard time finding jobs with any other airline company. But David didn't stop there. He created a new department called Passenger Dignity and Inclusion, with its own director and staff. This department would investigate any complaints about discrimination and have the power to fire employees who treated passengers unfairly. He also announced that every Skyline Airlines employee, from pilots to baggage handlers to gate agents, would have to complete 40 hours of anti-discrimination training before the flights could resume. The training would teach employees about treating all passengers with respect, regardless of their race, religion, or background. 3 days later, Marcus and Michael returned from Atlanta with huge smiles on their faces. Sarah's graduation had been beautiful, and the whole family had celebrated together. But the twins had become famous. Everywhere they went, people recognized them from the news and wanted to shake their hands. "You boys are heroes," their aunt had told them at the graduation party. "You stood up for what was right, and your father made sure the whole world knew about it." When the twins arrived back home, they found reporters waiting outside their house. Their parents had prepared them for this, explaining that their story had become important to many people across the country. At a press conference in their living room, Marcus and Michael spoke publicly for the first time about their experience. They were nervous at first, but their mother had helped them practice what to say. "We just wanted to go see our cousin graduate," Marcus told the reporters. "We didn't expect to be treated like criminals, but we're glad our story helped other people who have experienced discrimination," Michael added. Our dad taught us that when something is wrong, you have to speak up and try to fix it. He showed us that having power means using it to help people, not just to make money. The reporters asked many questions about how the experience had affected them. The twins were honest about feeling scared and embarrassed at first, but they said they were proud of how their father had responded. A week later, Skyline Airlines flights resumed. Every employee had completed their training, and new policies were in place to prevent discrimination. David had hired an outside company to test the airline by sending people of different races and backgrounds to buy tickets and see how they were treated. The financial cost had been enormous. The company lost over $60 million from the grounded flights, plus millions more for the training programs and new policies. The stock price had dropped, and some investors were angry. But something amazing happened that nobody expected. After the initial shock, more people began choosing to fly with Skyline Airlines. Customers respected the company for taking such strong action against discrimination. Other airlines began copying Skyline's new policies and training programs. David received thousands of letters and emails from passengers thanking him for his courage. Many people said they had switched to Skyline Airlines because they wanted to support a company that truly cared about treating all customers fairly. 6 months later, Marcus and Michael were invited to speak at their school's diversity assembly. They told their classmates about their experience and the importance of standing up against discrimination. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, Marcus told the audience. But those bad things can lead to positive changes if the right people are willing to take action. Michael talked about how the experience had changed his view of his father. I always knew my dad was successful in business, but that day I learned that he was also a man of strong principles. He showed me that being powerful means using that power to protect people who can't protect themselves. The twins had also started a scholarship fund for students who wanted to study aviation or business. They used money from speaking fees and donations to help other young people achieve their dreams of working in the airline industry. David Thompson became known throughout the business world as a leader who put principles before profits. He was invited to speak at conferences about corporate responsibility and fighting discrimination. Other CEOs began asking him for advice on how to create more inclusive companies. The most important change, however, was in the Thompson family itself. David realized that his success as a businessman meant nothing if his children couldn't be treated with dignity and respect. He began spending more time with Marcus and Michael, sharing not just his business knowledge but also his values and beliefs. That day changed all of us, David told a reporter months later. My sons learned that they have the right to be treated fairly, no matter where they go. And I learned that sometimes the most important business decision you can make has nothing to do with money. The story of Marcus and Michael Thompson became a symbol of hope for families everywhere who had experienced discrimination. It showed that when people with power choose to do the right thing, they can create real change that helps everyone.